Continues. It is not even remotely close to being a ceasefire.
In Kiev, Kherson, Zaporizhzhia, Lviv. This is CNN.
At Smithfield Foods, good is what we do.
People are turning to us.
Got on the field with not much preparation at all and has had
over and over again.
And build community one story at a time.
With the naked eye. South
Behind the wheel. Launch yourself on a heavy battle.
Is that we keep United States safe, we keep our troops safe, we provide Ukraine with the resources to defend themselves, and we work in accordance with NATO to make sure that the NATO countries that surround the Ukraine are protected.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Congressman, a chance to rebut.
Yeah, I agree with Ms. Harper, again, being very judicious with how we use our military, which is why 20 years ago I was very publicly out against the war in Iraq. I thought that was stupid, and it ended up costing us trillions and trillions of dollars that we should have used instead of building Iraq and Afghanistan. We should have been building the United States.
On the issue of the contractors, do you want to respond?
Well, I just want to say Ohio is a state that has a lot, tens of thousands of jobs that are directly connected to the defense industry, good-paying union jobs here in Ohio. And I don't think we need to waste money, but I don't think we should immediately be pulling the plug. These are businesses that, of course, I'm going to work with them. They're putting jobs into Ohio and employing Ohioans. Now, quickly, I have fought the Department of Defense on wasteful spending, including if it was an Ohio company. So TransDigm, which was bilking the taxpayer, bilking the Department of Defense, I took them on, and they ended up getting fined tens of millions of dollars for what they did wrong. So you can have both a strong defense, create jobs in the United States, and take on waste, fraud, and abuse in the Department of Defense.
All right, thank you. Let's move on to the next topic. We're going to talk Supreme Court. As you know, the nominating committee for Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson is currently actually meeting. They're moving steadily ahead with her vote. This, however, has raised a lot of questions about the political nature of the court, as some are calling it, and what can be done to ensure its legitimacy and integrity going forward. Ms. Harper, what do you think of Supreme Court reform? You actually favor stacking the court.
Yeah, and before I get to that, which I am very excited to answer that question, I do want to come back to one thing that was just said by the congressman, that equating having to take money, which really are bribes from corporations that are only enriching defense contractors, not here at home, but actually in the suburbs of Washington, D.C., and those executives become very rich as a cost of keeping their business in our state. Wow. Wow, a real misunderstanding of what leadership should be and what it takes to have good economic development for the state of Ohio. Now, getting to the issue of expanding the Supreme Court, which I do support. We now have an institution of our government, the Supreme Court, that has been radicalized by the GOP, that has pushed through these confirmations, and we need to be honest about the fact that that is happening and that it no longer represents the majority of the will of the people living in the state of Ohio or across this country. We need to recalibrate it, we need to balance it, and especially when we see what's happening right now with abortion access and their radical approach there, it is necessary that we both rebalance the Supreme Court, expand it, we need to codify Roe v. Wade into law, and we need to make sure that we get rid of the filibuster to make that possible. Very much support those things.
Ms. Johnson, Supreme Court reform.
Yeah, so Roe versus Wade is under attack like never before, and the decisions that are coming out of the Supreme Court tells us that we need to look at our justice system, and we need to look at the court systems. I'd like to first thank President Biden for his nomination of Judge Jackson as the first African-American nominee to the Supreme Court. But in regards to stacking the court, I think we need to tread lightly, because if we expand the court as Democrats, then when Republicans come in, they'll expand the court, and then the court will lose its power. I believe that we need to assess the decisions that are coming out. We need to make sure that we're getting conservative, liberal, and Democratic opinions from the court. We need to stop the Republican rule. Donald Trump has stacked the court, and he's provided an unbalanced and conservative viewpoints from the court. And we need more balance. We need more justice. The courts need to be fair. They need to be reflective of the people in our country and our community, so that the decisions that are coming out are reflective of good policy, of good justice, and justice for all, for which the courts are intended for.
Congressman Ryan, the issue of Supreme Court reform.
Yeah, if I could just quickly go back to the issue here in Ohio. There's over 1,000 workers at the Lima tank plant. Those people aren't living in the suburbs of Washington, D.C. They're in Lima, Ohio, slogging it out, making a living. There are dozens and dozens of Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3 suppliers, average Ohioans, white, black, brown, men, women, working in these defense industries. And I will always go to bat for them. I will always go to bat for them. We can figure out waste, fraud, and abuse. We can be judicious with how we use our military. But I will always be on the side of workers. And just because they work in the defense industry doesn't mean I'm going to turn my back on them. I'm going to fight for them too. When it comes to the Supreme Court, I'm not for stacking the court. I believe that we need to nominate justices like Justice Jackson, Judge Jackson. And I think she is the epitome of who we want on the Supreme Court, a record of working on behalf of working people, a record of protecting Roe v. Wade, always considering all different aspects and families who would potentially be affected by the decisions. But I don't think we should stack the court. I am for getting rid of the filibuster. I think that can solve 90% of the problems that we have by passing legislation that we've passed out of the House to codify Roe v. Wade with the Women's Health Protection Act, as Ms. Morgan mentioned, that goes to the Senate to die. So I think the real response here is get rid of the filibuster and start passing these important pieces of legislation that we've passed out of the House.
All right, let's move on. This is an issue that's very important to a lot of people in this room. During a town hall here at Central State University, many said that the most important issue for them right now is voting rights. Over the last year, as you are all aware, Republican-led state legislatures have passed unprecedented measures that many believe are tools of voter suppression that give more.
Academy Award certainly wasn't going to do it. I mean, literally, there is pedophiles still holding Academy Awards, and for him to do that was more of him understanding the significance of what he's done. It is a great honor as an actor to be in that class, and he resigned from it. Again, ultimately it's going to come down to what Chris Rock feels about this, if he's going to be man enough to reach out to him and apologize. You would like to see that. But at the end of the day, most of the people in that building would literally work for ISIS if ISIS got a movie company. So they have no pulse and no heart when it comes to anything. And they didn't know whether to clap or cheer because they figured they could probably make more movies with Will Smith than they could with Chris Rock. And that's probably what it came down to. And not to mention the rest of the show was
bought them. Face it, you can't have
the hypocrisy. It was just unbearable. I didn't actually watch it. Even I was playing my Xbox. My buddies text me, go, "Yo, Chris Rock just got slapped by Will Smith," and I literally said, "Yeah, but I lose all my progress if I save now. So I'll just catch it tomorrow." That's how important it was to me.
Yeah, I watched it afterwards
too.
Either,
but
yeah.
Yeah, I don't think anybody was actually watching it here. But one person who I think agrees.
Is a new day.
It's time to make a stand. Start a
events of January 6th. Let's go there. Federal prosecutors are issuing grand jury subpoenas to the planners, organizers of Donald Trump's Save America rally, which of course preceded the attack on the Capitol. What does the development say to you about the breadth and depth of this investigation now?
Well, we've known that the Justice Department has been very aggressive in prosecuting those that were present for the insurrection and the attack on our elections on January 6th. Now that we know that they are also looking at those who planned and paid for and did the logistics for this attack is very, very important. And I think it's just the Justice Department has a vital role to play, as does the January 6th Commission, in bringing all of this information out and making sure that we've got accountability. So I'm encouraged to see this word from the Justice Department for sure.
Now, talking about the January 6th committee, they are also seeking to interview Jenny Thomas, wife of Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, about her activities on that day, including leaning on Trump Chief of Staff Mark Meadows to overturn the 2020 election and attending the Stop the Steal rally. Given all that, should her husband recuse himself from cases related to January 6th, in your opinion?
Absolutely. Justice Thomas should recuse himself. He should have recused himself for the first case where he did not. It was the one lone Supreme Court justice voting against releasing Trump administration documents, and he should recuse himself now. And this is something that he understands. He recused himself when there was a case before the Supreme Court around the school that his son was attending at the time. Here, we have the unprecedented circumstance of a Supreme Court justice's family member, his wife, actively lobbying the executive branch to overturn our free elections. It is absolutely essential that he recuse himself. And let me also say, Chief Justice Roberts has an important role to play here, holding Justice Thomas accountable. And we have to move to some clear ethical standards on the Supreme Court to stop this kind of behavior, because I think what Justice Thomas is doing is blatantly unethical.
Now, before we go, I have to ask, of course, about the possible history in the works this week. The Senate Judiciary Committee meeting on Monday to review Ketanji Brown Jackson's Supreme Court nomination. The final vote expected a few days after that. At least one Republican, Senator Susan Collins, on the record, saying she'll vote to confirm Jackson. Will history be made this week, Senator, and your thoughts about it?
I believe that history will be made. This is a breakthrough moment, the first Black woman to be nominated, and I expect to be confirmed to the Supreme Court. A brilliant legal mind, a person of the highest ethical standards and integrity, and also somebody who had to withstand just malicious and unfair attacks on her record that she withstood with such grace and honor. I think that it is a joyful moment as we see this really important step, and she deserves broad bipartisan support from members of the Senate, despite the fact that Mitch McConnell is actively lobbying against her.
Let me ask you this. This week, I was honored to sit in the Rose Garden as they signed the Emmett Till anti-lynching bill into federal law, something that we've struggled for decades to try to get. Well, what are your thoughts about President Biden now signing the Emmett Till anti-lynching bill into law?
Well, I think it is another step in the long march towards justice. The fact that President Biden took this, made a moment of this is really remarkable. But I mean, I think also you have to ask yourself, think about this, that we have to be in this day and age signing into law an anti-lynching bill, a bill that was blocked only a year or so ago, is just sort of incredible. So I have to say I see this as a moment of a sense of real progress, but also a sense of the long road ahead of us as we continue this march towards justice.
Yeah, I agree with you. I had mixed emotions sitting there thinking why it took so long. But I was glad the president brought up Ahmaud Arbery and Charlottesville, saying these things are continuing to happen. Senator Tina Smith, thank you for being with us. Next in this week's Gotcha, I'll explain why I'm not ready to stop talking about former President Donald Trump. And later, far-right Republicans reportedly hold an emergency meeting as they speak out against U.S. aid to Ukraine. And they could be playing into Putin's hand. My political panel weighs in. But first, my colleague Richard Louis with today's top news stories. Richard?
Rev, good Saturday to you. Some of the stories we're watching. COVID-19 cases in the UK have reached record level highs. 1 in 13 people now infected in the past week, according to U.S. government estimates. The more transmissible Omicron variant BA2 driving this, and now the dominant variant in the UK. And NASA is conducting a dress rehearsal this weekend, a test launch of its new moon rocket to officially go up this summer. The two-day operation culminates in a countdown that ends just 9 seconds before engines would ignite. The space agency hopes to send astronauts to the moon on the rocket as early as 2025. More Politics Nation with Reverend Al Sharpton right after this break.
Fact, we all love video doorbells. Voices.
They are double digits.
Savannah McCaskill.
Second reason is that a lot of these will only operate with their chopping blades.
A new trailer.
I just have a couple. What kind of interaction have you had with the private landowners around?
So as part of that stakeholder conversations that we did during this design process, we did talk to a number of the private landowners around.
Your ground is give nutrients back to the soil, which is extremely important to me. Because the way that we run our gardens here is that I am not adding inorganic fertilizer throughout the year. In the beginning of the year, I had a calculated amount of inorganic fertilizer, but everything else is going to be compost. Everything else is just going to be.
And there are new reports tonight from the British Defense Ministry that Russian forces are withdrawing from key areas around Kyiv. Jeff Paul, live on the ground in Lviv. Jeff, what's the latest?
Yeah, Todd, Russia claimed this week that they'd be pulling out troops from cities like Kyiv and Chernihiv as a way to establish mutual trust with these ongoing peace talks. And after a few days of what seemed like more intense fighting in those cities, officials here on the ground say it does now appear there is evidence of a withdrawal. And that's clear by some of the images that we're seeing coming out of the Kyiv region as Ukrainian forces push back any Russian forces that remain in the area. And in fact, some officials on the ground tonight saying that Kyiv has been liberated. But Ukrainian forces are still skeptical of this pullback, and that's for good reason. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelenskyy believes Russian forces have created a catastrophic situation, especially for folks coming back to the city. He's warning folks not to return because Russia has placed mines around homes, on abandoned equipment, and even on the bodies of those who have been killed. U.S. officials and Ukrainian officials also say there's the possibility of redeployment in the area and in some cases a rerouting of Russian troops to the east.
They are withdrawing troops in certain areas, probably in order to strengthen the grouping of the occupying forces for further offensive operations in Slobodansky, Donetsk and Lugansk areas.
Now, in the besieged city of Mariupol, more than 100,000 civilians remain trapped from the outside world. There are very little resources there to sustain life in that coastal city at the moment. And when agencies like the Red Cross try to enter the city to bring in aid or to rescue people, so far they have been on a wide scale very unsuccessful. So it's leaving people who are in Mariupol to risk their own lives to try to get through all that Russian shelling and the Russian troops who are out there right now just to get to safer cities, in particular to western Ukraine, like where we're at here in Lviv. Todd?
Jeff Paul, thank you very much. You mentioned the rerouting of troops to the east. There's concern, isn't there, that this is all part of a Russian strategy, a new strategy, if you will, in light of their failure so far in the bulk of the country to really split Ukraine in two. One, an area to the east that Russia controls, and then two, an area to the west that Ukraine holds onto. Is that the sense that you're getting on the ground?
Well, it would seem like a strategic move here to sort of create this land corridor that many of us have been talking about here. Russian forces right now are in Crimea, which Ukrainian officials still considered an occupied territory that's essentially there. So they're trying to kind of connect everything from the east all the way down from Mariupol along the coast and also control, the coastal port towns along the Black Sea.
Hey, Jeff, Laura Trump here. Just wondering, I feel like for so many of us watching from around the world, it's really felt like that Russia was far overestimated in this war, and Ukraine was very, very much underestimated, especially when we hear things like the fact that Russia is retreating. Of course, that could be a false flag, at least from certain areas. What is the general sentiment from folks on the ground? Do they feel the same way? Do the Ukrainian people feel like they were underestimated and that they far outperformed expectations?
I think that's sort of the feeling in general for Ukraine and the Ukrainian people. They've dealt with the Russians for quite a long time, and it's something they've had to fight for and now are continuing to fight for, even as recent as 2014 in dealing with Crimea, and now you have their entire country being invaded by Russian forces. So there's a lot of fight to them. They're a very proud people, and of course they're going to great lengths to protect their freedom and their way of life.
What up, Jeff? Tyrus here, man. First of all, how are you holding up?
Oh, it pales in comparison to what these people are going through right now, Tyrus. It really does.
You know, when I kind of get that weird gut feeling when I'm looking at this. The withdrawal seems kind of, I'm very skeptical of it for peace. Is there any talk on the ground or any fear that the reason this might be for maybe a chemical attack or possible nuclear attack, that there's troops suddenly are falling back? Are they concerned about the distance of how far they're falling back? Is there any concern of that?
That's certainly been a topic of discussion, that when you pull troops out, something else is going to be coming back in. There's also the concern of just doubling down or bringing in troops from elsewhere around Russia to come back in. And but I think it underscores really we don't know where this is going. There's only one person who truly knows what's going to happen next, and that's Vladimir Putin.
Hi, Jeff. Lisa Booth here. Appreciate the work you're doing. You know, as a reporter in the fog of war, how do you get to the truth? I mean, there's just so much propaganda. Obviously, if you're Russia, you want the perception that you're doing better than you are. If you're Ukraine, you want to get more Western involvement. You want the U.S. to be more involved. We also have an administration that recently lied to us about a drone attack in Afghanistan, telling us that it took out a terrorist when, in fact, it was an aid worker and children. So how do you get to the truth in the environment that we're operating in?
It's difficult, and part of it too is the distance, especially where we're at, because a lot of the fighting is happening in the east and we're of course in the west. And I think this is when you really rely upon your fellow colleagues out in the field and your trusted other associates and reporters, and especially the fixers and the people here who call Ukraine home, who are working with us right now. You really have to lean on them, and you have to be cautious about what you're reporting and what it really means, sort of reading in between the lines to sometimes find that truth.
Jeff, you and all of our teams there in Ukraine doing an amazing job. Thank you for what you're doing, and thank you for joining us this evening. Jeff Paul, live in Lviv. Next, a gay Disney employee slams the company as the happiest place on earth becomes the wokest. The fallout over one of the world's most popular companies. Next.
The truth is told that you can get what you want. Most out of my workplace benefits.
What's the Wi-Fi password again?
Between President Zelenskyy and Putin. You know, the Ukrainians have wanted that for a long time. The Russians have been stalling. So I guess the question for you in terms of the military landscape is, you know, can the Russians afford to hang in and even beyond May, Victory Day and all the rest of it, you know, try to secure some kind of victory? Do the Ukrainians need to go for a proper settlement while they have what by and large seems to be the upper hand in most parts of the country?
Well, first of all, we need to hear our administration and our allies talk about winning, to use the word win instead of so much emphasis on avoiding escalation, and there's so much talk about getting a settlement. And I think that I take President Zelenskyy at his word. He says, you know, until the Russians have left Ukrainian territory, now is the chance to correct the mistake of 2014 that Ambassador Volker referenced, to get the Russians out of Ukraine. And if we don't, then for sure the Russians are going to wait for us to lose interest in the Black Sea region for 2 or 3 years, and they're going to come back. So this has implications not only for Ukraine, but for all of Russia's periphery. Our president a week ago said this is about democracy versus autocracy. This sounds to me like we need to talk about winning and achieving an objective, not rushing to get a settlement that rewards Russia in any way for the murder of thousands of innocent Ukrainians.
Interesting you should put it that way, General, because the French leaders have also said winning is a strategic necessity, not just for Ukraine, but for the West as well. General Hodges, Ambassador Volker, thank you so much for joining me. And we are going to take a short break now, and we'll be back with much more.
I've always focused on my career, but when we found out our son had a
Icing calls now.
Your food addiction. Get the latest news, breaking news, weather, and sports on the KELO News app. Stay connected with alert notifications. Choose the alerts you want to receive. Turn off the ones you don't. Watch live broadcasts, live events, and weather updates wherever you go. Use the app to report news in your area. Know on the go. Download the KELO News app today.
Participants here today came from as far as Sioux Falls and Rapids.
An author.
With Dakota News Now.
News when you want it isn't just a saying. It's a promise we've made at Dakota News Now.
Now we're expanding on that commitment and giving you another option for news on the weekend.
Join us Saturday and Sunday morning starting at 9. It's a later look at headlines and events happening near you.
And I'll have a look at your first alert forecast to show you if your weekend plans are a go or not.
So go ahead, hit that snooze button one more time, grab a cup of coffee, and start your weekends with us.
Join Cordell Wright and meteorologist Austin Haskins weekend mornings at 9 on Dakota News Now.
So you're an early bird. Be a night owl in
a political group of them have a self-described emergency meeting to sound the alarm, not just about Biden's handling of the Ukraine invasion, but about their differences with other Republicans who oppose Russia's action. Is this wing of the GOP doing Putin's bidding in the U.S.? So what should be done about it if so?
Well, look, I don't want to confuse what could just be a convergence of interests for collusion. I mean, I think they're clearly on the same side. They're on the same side in terms of authoritarianism versus democracy. They're obviously on the same side in terms of their support for Donald Trump, their desire to see, American liberal democracy fail and be replaced with something else. Whether they're doing Putin's bidding or whether they just have, similar interests in the world is, I think, it's not something I'm going to speculate on. I would say that when I was speaking recently to someone I've reported on for several years, a prominent Ukrainian investigative journalist and politician who is now advising the Ukrainian government on disinformation, he was quite concerned to hear American members of Congress like Marjorie Taylor Greene repeating Russian propaganda because it helps to legitimate it. And then, as you know, people on the right here will spout this propaganda, and then Russian television plays it back to their own people. Even the Americans are saying this. And it ends up having, a truly deleterious effect.
Carlos, in 2 days, Senate Judiciary Committee in the Capitol is scheduled to vote on whether to advance Ketanji Brown Jackson's Supreme Court nomination. Now, Judge Jackson will receive bipartisan support, with Senator Susan Collins saying she plans to vote in favor of a confirmation. There could be additional GOP votes in support of Judge Jackson when the full Senate vote is conducted, probably before the Easter recess. Additionally, polling shows Judge Jackson to be very popular thus far with the American people. One poll found 2/3 support her confirmation. Did Republicans overplay their hand grandstanding against this historic judicial pick?
Reverend, I think some did. I mean, Judge Jackson, which, by the way, is from South Florida, from Miami, so we've been pleased to watch her handle herself so well and really show that she has great temperament, which is as important for a judge as whatever their ideological views or the way they interpret the Constitution. But certainly she has won over the American people. And to the extent that some Republicans, like Ted Cruz and others, were overly aggressive in coming after her, that kind of attitude and approach could be rejected and might even help Democrats in November. And I do think it's good news for the country that a Supreme Court judge will be confirmed with both Democratic and Republican support. And Senator Collins' support is critical. She has a lot of credibility. She has voted for both Republican and Democratic nominees to the Supreme Court. So I think that center of the country that tends to be decisive in all these matters really took note of the Susan Collins decision. And I think the country is becoming increasingly comfortable with having someone like Judge Jackson on the Supreme Court.
Michelle, let's turn to January 6th. An Alabama man was sentenced to 4 years in prison after he drove to Capitol Hill on January 6th in a pickup truck loaded with a small arsenal of Molotov cocktails, guns, ammunition, and other weapons, then wandered away from the truck and never used any of them before they were discovered. Right now, over 700 people have been charged with crimes related to the attack. Vox reports that the House committee may recommend criminal charges against Trump. Which is the likelihood of this happening, in your opinion? And do you think the panel will be able to complete its report before the midterms?
So I don't, at this point, have very much faith in Judge Garland being, in Attorney General Garland being aggressive in response to wrongdoing by the previous administration. I think it's very difficult to kind of get your hopes up for accountability, given the fact that prosecutors over and over again have made the decision to to sort of not take the hard cases, right? We saw it with Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg and his decision over the objections of the people who were doing the investigation into Donald Trump to basically say, or not to say, to say in the opinion of the people who were doing the investigation that this was just too hard of a case to bring. Look, I don't think that there's very much question that Donald Trump committed crimes. I will be shocked if the January 6th committee doesn't come to that conclusion. I assume that they will release their report, if not before the midterms, before the new Congress is sworn in. The problem is that they can recommend charges, but they can't bring them.
And even a recommendation does not mean that the Justice Department would pursue criminal charges against the former president. Right. All right, Carlos, let's go to this. The Biden administration announced Friday that it's planning to end Title 42 in May. It is a Trump-era public health policy that made it harder for immigrants or migrants to seek asylum in the United States in the name of fighting the pandemic. Immigration rights advocates have been calling for this to happen for some time. Is it the right move?
Reverend, I think this is a decision that the Biden administration could regret. Early on in the president's term, he got low marks from the American people in poll after poll because there was chaos at the border. This decision could trigger more chaos at the border. That's why Senator Sinema and Kelly of Arizona asked the administration not to take this step at this time. Immigration policy is a lot about communication. and what kind of messages you're sending to people all over the world. And by the way, the migrants themselves are victims. The people who are going to exploit this policy change are the coyotes, the criminal organizations that traffic these vulnerable human beings, that sometimes rape young girls. I mean, this is just a difficult situation. I think the Biden administration had a lot of pressure from the activist community to change this policy, but this is a decision they might regret. If there's more chaos at the border, that will definitely hurt Democrats in the November election.
Michelle, let's switch gears again. Let's go now to Sarah Palin, who announced that she's running for the U.S. House seat representing Alaska. After the death of GOP Representative Don Young last month, Palin was perhaps a bit ahead of her time when John McCain picked her as a running mate nearly a decade ago. And has the Republican Party caught up to her?
Well, look, yes, she certainly was, you know, in many ways the prototype for what has now become basically the median Republican and would fit quite well into the party of, you know, Donald Trump, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Madison Cawthorn. So it's not surprising that, you know, Trump and other figures are urging her to win. She has won statewide in Alaska. The only thing I think that could possibly work against her is that, you know, she wasn't elected governor as a fire-breathing, you know, a sort of fire-breathing right-wing demagogue, even though that's what she turned out to be, particularly after her vice presidential campaign. You know, she was seen, I think, at the time as more of a common sense, down-to-earth figure, right? Whether she can win as the second coming of Michelle Bachmann remains to be seen.
Carlos, let's go to this. The Daily Beast reports that Ginny Thomas, wife of Supreme Court Judge Clarence Thomas, regularly met with Donald Trump while he was president, often providing him lists of people whom he should fire and hire. This is on top of her aggressively lobbying Trump's White House Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows, to do more to try and overturn the 2020 election. The January 6th House Committee is considering calling Ginny Thomas to testify. How should Republicans be responding to the allegations against Thomas, who, after all, is the wife of a Supreme Court justice?
Well, Reverend, I think what Republicans really have to understand is that this diminishes the credibility of the court. The Supreme Court, most Americans still believe, is independent-minded, does look at each case independent of political party affiliation, and this diminishes the credibility of the court. This makes it seem like someone who is the closest person to a Supreme Court justice who's deeply invested in trying to overturn the election result and trying to help Donald Trump stay in power. Obviously, the Supreme Court had a big role in that whole process. So Republicans need to understand that maybe it does make sense for Justice Thomas to recuse himself from some cases. I don't think he needs to resign from the court. There's nothing illegal about what his wife was doing, but certainly it diminishes the credibility of the court. It raises questions about what Justice Thomas's motivations might be. So some of these Republicans are coming out so stridently defending Justice Thomas might understand this is not about one man or one person. This is about the Supreme Court, which is one of the most important institutions in our country and an institution that needs to be trusted by the American people. We know that most Americans don't trust Congress. They don't trust the executive branch. We can't afford for most Americans to not trust the Supreme Court either.
Michelle, before I lose you, your thoughts on this historic week where I joined others at the White House for the signing of the law of the Emmett Till anti-lynching bill?
I think that, you know, it shows that as frustrating as these last few months, particularly if this administration has been, as hard as progress has been, it still matters enormously who is in the executive branch, right? It matters in terms of nominations, and it still matters enormously who controls Congress. I mean, on the one hand, it's hard to feel, I think, jubilant about a bill that is this long overdue. But the fact, the fact that it took this long to have a federal anti-lynching bill is in many ways stunning. But if Democrats lose in November, we're not going to have legislation like this again, or, kind of legislation to address historic wrongs in this country for a very long time.
Yeah, and I was so happy as I sat there for the president to say this is still going on. He mentioned Charlottesville, he mentioned Ahmaud Arbery. It is still going on, though the bill is long overdue. Michelle Goldberg and former Representative Carlos Cabello, thank you both for being with us. After the break, a new report reveals just how difficult finding refuge is for non-white people fleeing the war in Ukraine. Unfortunately, the racism doesn't stop if they're able to get out. I'll explain next.
Better hearing leads.
It has all changed since Joe Biden became president of the United States, and it is because of his bad policies and all the policies of the Democrats, all this extra spending. You can't.
Free awning idea kit packed with great awning solutions that will let you enjoy your deck.
Oh, try it for free at freestylelibre.us. Motrin works fast to stop pain where it starts.
I would say several things about Forward Sioux Falls, and I know many of you are well versed in what Forward Sioux Falls has done historically for our community. But you have to look at conceptually what Forward Sioux Falls is, and that is an economic development program with the intention of collectively coming together, putting funds together to raise up the area's economy. And we believe, proven that we've done this in numerous ways by helping to bring, and we're not ever going to take full credit because we have a lot of partners within Forward Sioux Falls, and the city being a primary one historically. But we need to look at the growth that Sioux Falls has had, and we believe Forward Sioux Falls has had an integral part in that. Bringing people here, bringing companies here, making sure that our airport is providing the flights that is needed from a quality of life perspective and from a business perspective, making sure that advocacy is at the forefront. Forward Sioux Falls is something that we believe is easy to understand the significant benefits of. We do, as I believe you're all aware, provide an annual report of the progress that has been made each and every year, and we will do that again per contract. Happy to do that. There is also, at the end of every 5-year program, an ROI, and we will be happy to provide that as well. There's also a projected ROI for the next 5 years, so we're excited to also share that with you. We thank you very much for the partnership throughout these over 30 years that the city has walked hand in hand with Forward Sioux Falls. Forward Sioux Falls is also one that is really a convener. It brings together the private sector, the public sector, brings people to the table to really address issues and help to solve problems, much like you do each and every week. So we thank you very much for your consideration for this funding, and we'll be happy to work with you over the next 5 years to help the city grow. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mike. Anyone else here to speak on this one?
All right, we got a motion and a second on the floor. Discussion. Councilor Erickson.
Thank you. And I know there was a lot of discussion amongst us as councilors today, as well as we talked through some of these items that we were looking at pulling. And I think the difference with this, and I want to certainly separate myself from the second speaker's comments, because I do know the good work that you do. I do know what you do in the community. I think some of the angst sometimes with collectively, I don't want to speak for the city council as a whole, but you hear us saying it often in general of bring us along on the ride, bring us through. We've been given updates on the Development Foundation. We meet with them on a quarterly basis. We meet with all these other different folks, and I think so some of it is we want you to share your story. We know how much work you're doing. We know the good work you're doing, but we want you to share your story so the community knows. You know, a while ago it was talked about that, I can't remember the exact timeline, that the reason for the additional funding per some research today was that you were supposed to take on the talent portal and some of those. Those are the things that we want to hear. I know Sioux Falls Development Foundation also does that, but knowing the critical time we are in this country with workforce and in Sioux Falls, what's going on with that. We have so many generous people giving to this, this foundation. And again, this is a positive. Just because it got pulled from consent doesn't mean that it's not a positive or that you're a target. Again, I certainly separate myself from the comments previously because I think those are unfair while I support the freedom of speech. I think the other issue has been is that it's been well over a year that we've had a formal presentation, and oftentimes shame on us for a council for not inviting you sooner. But when you see a 25% increase after 5 years compounded, we just want to know what you're doing. We want you to share your story. We are happy what you're doing in our community, but we need that information for you to share your story beyond providing a report. I probably get 6 reports a week from every single different place that we give to. And I read the vast majority of them, but this is a substantial amount compared to what some of the other organizations that we do give to. And so again, I don't want you to think because this was pulled that you don't have support from this council. It's really along the lines of, we just want you to share your story. We want you to market it. We want you to tell everybody what you're doing because we know you're doing good work.
Other discussion, Councilor?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Starr.
I would move to defer this item to April 5th.
I'll second that.
All right, motion by Starr, seconded by Erickson to defer this item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would echo Councilor Erickson's remarks. We're not displeased with what's going on, but if we defer to April 5th, that'll give us the opportunity to possibly have an informational or have a full presentation of the results of the last 5 years before we enter into a new 5-year agreement. And we're able to toot the horn of the successes that we've had, and we want to celebrate those successes and be part of this public-private partnership into the future.
All right, other discussion on the motion to defer this one? Councilor Jensen.
I would urge my colleagues to not support the substitute motion. As Mike had kind of pointed out, this was really important this year. You saw advocacy at work for this city of Sioux Falls. You saw housing get a fund in the state legislature, and that's going to help with affordable housing. And if you look at any community that's thriving like ours, affordable housing is a problem in all of those areas because people want to come here. We're not going to just be able to stop people from coming into Sioux Falls. So we got housing done through the advocacy of Ford Sioux Falls, the Chamber, and the Development Foundation. We have the DSU Cyber Research Applied Science Building. This is going to be a partnership with the City of Sioux Falls, the State of South Dakota, private donors, and then Ford Sioux Falls.
Not too much troops there, and the start of this war was so, let's say, unexpected, so we had no ability to empower them there. So let's say they haven't got Kherson, they just moved in Kherson, and people, armed people, fall back to Ukraine here, to Nikolaev region. Now we don't have connection with the occupied area, and several, let's say, buses from the Kherson region come here with refugees. We're getting them here in Nikolaev. We give them food and etc. and send them back to, not back, forward to the west.
Mayor Alexander Stankiewicz, thank you so much. And still ahead, Pope Francis takes on Vladimir Putin, blasting the Russian leader for launching, quote, a savage war in Ukraine. Could we see the Pope make a trip here to Kyiv? A live report next.
Earn 5% cash back on travel purchased through Chase with Chase Freedom Unlimited. Earn 5% on our cabin. Hello, cash back!
Hello, Kevin Hart.
Earn big time with Chase Freedom Unlimited with no annual fee. How do you cash back? Chase, make more of what's yours.
Feel stuck with credit card debt? Move to SoFi and feel what it's like to get your money right.
I jump up on the stage and do my money dance. I throw some money out and watch the money land. I do my money dance.
Move your high-interest debt to a SoFi personal loan. You could get out of debt sooner and get your money right.
On the stage and do my money dance.
I wanted to show you guys something that has been truly bringing me joy, and that is HelloFresh. I get a variety of delicious ingredients, and I can whip up my meal in about 20 to 30 minutes, and I save money, which are all touchdowns in my book.
Go to HelloFresh.com and use code TV16 for 16 free meals plus 3 free gifts.
Toughest spills are no match for the world's best vehicle protection. Laser-measured WeatherTech floor liners. Discover all the ways to keep your vehicle looking like new at WeatherTech.com. Proudly made in America.
This is an urgent appeal from UNHCR, the UN Refugee Agency. As conflict and tragedy strike Ukraine, the world is watching and worrying, desperate to save their lives and protect loved ones. Some have fled within their country, while others have sought safety across borders. Most are women and youth, and a heartbreaking amount of children are arriving in neighboring countries alone. Please go online and give what you can today.
When Alaska Airlines needed a partner for the complex operations of travel, they made the switch to T-Mobile. Our 5G has Alaska Airlines and their customers covered, from major hubs to remote destinations. With 5G coverage ready now for the demands of today and the future. T-Mobile's network powers Alaska Airlines as they deliver next-level care for all customers. 5G ready now. That's how unconventional thinking is better for business.
Hi! Need new glasses? Buy one pair, get one free at VisionWorks. How can you see me squinting? I can't, I'm just telling everyone. Hey!
Buy one pair, get one free. VisionWorks. See the difference.
Fact, we all love video doorbells. Voice assistants have changed our lives. We now control our home with a touch.
Working. In the kind of work that I do, you are surrounded.
I think they're going to get votes now. They've tried everything else and nothing has worked. But I'm just going to say to Joe Biden, yes, please take advice from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Please listen to her as we head towards the midterms and really focus in on the very far left fringe stuff that she wants you to do. Because you know what, Tyrus? Nobody wants any of it. You know, you look at things that people like AOC and her squad have advocated for, like defund the police, and in recent polling, people said that they were the least likely folks that they would vote for, anyone that wants to defund the police. Guess who?
Item 58, new 2021-22 retail malt beverage South Dakota Farm Wine License for Crystal Investment Incorporated, Black Diamond Casino 4, 5113 West 41st Street, Suite 104. Item 59, request to add video lottery terminals with the 2020.
Medical spending increased by 70%, and over 50% per capita. This is all illustrated on Chart 1 behind me. Now, there are likely many reasons for a decline in medical debt. A primary driver was the improving economy. After the tax reform of 2017, those with the lowest wages, those most likely to have medical debt, were making the biggest gains in income. Another driver of the decline was the enactment of Obamacare and Medicaid expansion. Researchers estimate that for every $25 spent on Medicaid expansion, medical debt in collections decreased by $1. There are many aspects that have made me question the wisdom and efficacy of Medicaid expansion, including its cost and the lack of evidence that it improved health care outcomes. But unsurprisingly, if you're willing to spend massive amounts of other people's money, you can transfer individuals' debts onto the taxpayer. That's illustrated in chart number 2. So all available evidence suggests that there is no growing burden of medical debt. In fact, the scale of medical debt is often misunderstood. As chart 3 illustrates, medical debt in collection represents less than 1% of all household debts. 2/3 of medical debt collections are under $500. And bankruptcy from medical debt is extremely rare, as illustrated in chart 4. 0.03% of the population suffers bankruptcy each year as a result of a hospitalization. And medical debt is not strictly an American phenomenon. Every healthcare system in the developed world includes some out-of-pocket payments. According to the World Health Organization, even before Medicaid expansion, the likelihood that out-of-pocket expenses would exceed 1/4 of one's income was roughly as rare in the United States, 0.8%, as Canada or the UK, about 0.5%, and considerably rarer than in Italy, Spain, Korea, Switzerland, and other countries in the developed world. Recently, credit reporting agencies announced changes that will reduce the amount of medical debt that appears on consumer credit reports going forward. Now, if a credit reporting agency decides to exclude this information, I don't think it's the government's role to meddle with that decision. However, if credit reporting agencies had collectively decided the opposite, if every one of them had gotten together and they decided they'd begin at the same time to add consumers' medical debt information onto reports, I suspect the howls and protests about greed and collusion would have been deafening.
Version of Thomas's testimony is to ensure all generations, it's not just future generations, it's all generations, that this event never happens again. And we have Thomas's voice and Thomas's experiences to hopefully help in that process. And I say this rather sadly because obviously what the tragic events happening in Ukraine at the moment. So I hope that just gives you a little bit about the book behind the book, the process of putting a book like this together. And thank you very much for listening in.
Lives abruptly. The first time we had a black producer of the Oscars, Will Packard, who did an excellent job. We had Questlove win an Oscar for a documentary, Summer Soul, that dealt with a black Woodstock right at Morris Park in Harlem, showing all kinds of talent. It won an Oscar. We saw Samuel L. Jackson win an Oscar. No one talked about that. We cannot have the only story, violence against one another, when we ought to be talking about those with quality and value. That ought to be the Oscar story. That is why at National Action Network's convention that starts next Wednesday, we're going to engage in dealing with policy and how we deal with what Dwight McKee calls consequential thinking, how we deal with health care and deal with voting rights and deal with police reform, and everyone from Hillary Clinton to our own congresspeople and senators and Congressional Black Caucus members will be there to talk about how we strategize to change laws and make policy happen and not just have emotional reaction. Go to www.nationalactionnetwork.net and come to the convention 3 days this week. That does it for me. Thanks for watching. I'll see you back here tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern for another live hour of Politics Nation. Our news coverage continues here on MSNBC at the top of the hour.
Under 11K. Learn more at Phoenix.
Progressive, so it was a happy ending. Or almost.
The action on the NBC Sports app or NBCSports.com.
And, give Kemps, the...
And San Diego back.
Looking map. Sure, you may want to see more, but take what you can get. On average, I would say 1/10 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch is looking likely. Even heavier if you're caught underneath a thunderstorm in eastern Kettleland. Again, take what you can get, as we know it's been very dry across the area. Any day with warm temperatures and strong winds means fire danger will be back. Later this week and for the weekend, there may be a couple of scattered showers out and about, but it looks like the amounts will stay less than 1/10 of an inch. For KELO weather, I'm meteorologist Scott Munt.
You're watching weather information every minute of every day.
And we're able.
Hey, buddy, good job.
I also am the youngest of 6 siblings who all care deeply about our mom. If you've ever brought a parent or loved one to a nursing home knowing that they will live out their final days there, knowing you are trusting all of their care and comfort to strangers, that's a day you'll never forget. Because Mom was suffering from Alzheimer's and had difficulty understanding what was happening, my siblings and I decided I would be Mom's representative for the nursing home admission and sign all the paperwork that allowed my mom to be admitted into the facility. Mom's Social Security checks were used to pay for her portion of the nursing home bill, and Medicaid covered the rest. Knowing my finances were already tight, I made sure to check the box on the nursing home admission form which said I did not agree to be personally liable if finances for my mom's medical care ran out. I have a household of my own to take care of, and I knew I couldn't afford to pay any nursing home for my mom's medical expenses. In November 2019, the nursing home staff told me my mom's Medicaid needed to be reinstated. So I went to the office and filled out some more forms. I didn't hear anything from them about Medicaid for months, so I assumed that everything had been taken care of. I was shocked when the nursing home told me in May 2020 that Mom's Medicaid had not been reapproved and that I was now responsible for paying a huge bill. Why hadn't they told me this months ago? How could they have kept this information from me when I always did everything the nursing home asked me to do? Maybe we could have figured out a way to prevent them from coming after me for this debt. Because the nursing home took so long to tell me that Medicaid had stopped paying Mom's bills, the amount owed had grown huge. They were now trying to collect almost $70,000, and while I tried frantically to fix the situation, the nursing home started sending bills each month, every bill larger than the last.
San Diego,
to visually reduce
They come from people who were brave.
Ukraine fights back against Russia's assault. Good evening, I'm John Scott, and this is a special 2-hour edition of the Fox Report. Despite the troop withdrawals, President Vladimir Zelenskyy of Ukraine says he expects Russian missile and rocket strikes to continue. And he's warning his people that the Russians left mines behind throughout the city of Kyiv. U.S. officials say Russian forces are repositioning in eastern Ukraine. Meantime, Ukraine has denied responsibility for a strike on a Russian oil depot yesterday, the first time Moscow has accused Ukraine of an attack on Russian soil. Reports suggest Russia may have carried out the strike in a false flag operation to try to undermine peace talks. In an interview with Fox News, President Zelenskyy refused to weigh in, saying he does not discuss his military orders. Zelenskyy also told our Brett Baer, quote, "Besides victory, the Ukrainian people will not accept any outcome," adding that Ukraine will not give up any of its territory to Russia. We have Fox team coverage from Ukraine, Poland, and the United States. First, to Jeff Paul. He is live in Lviv, Ukraine. Jeff.
Vladimir Putin. That is likely little comfort, though, for civilians trapped in cities like Mariupol in the south. For the second straight day, the Red Cross has been trying to reach the devastated city. 100,000 civilians are still trapped there. But let us begin right here in Kyiv with senior international correspondent Fred Pleitgen, and he is here with me. Fred, it is pretty amazing after all of this that we've been covering to hear a senior official say liberated around here.
Yes.
But you've been out and about, we've been out and about. Just explain what you've been seeing.
Yeah, and it seems to be real. I mean, certainly seems to be the case that the Russians are simply gone, that they've withdrawn from this area. But they did so under a hail of fire. That's one of the things that we always have to point out, that when they were withdrawing, they just unleashed this massive artillery fire, especially on the outskirts of Kiev, as they were probably trying to cover their retreat. And what you see then in the aftermath is, first of all, that the Ukrainians seem to not have been underestimating the amount of Russian armor that was being destroyed. I mean, when we were going around, you see it everywhere. You see destroyed tanks, armored vehicles, trucks, everything. The Russians seem to have taken a massive beating here. And the other thing, unfortunately, is you see a lot of dead bodies everywhere. It's a really gruesome thing, but it does seem as though a lot of civilians have been killed.
I mean, there was even some talk, you know, in the town of Bucha, there might be a mass grave.
Yeah, this is what the Ukrainian officials are saying. They're saying it's around 300 bodies. I think they're still trying to sort of come to terms with that, and it's not the end of it. There's still more bodies in the streets there as well.
Can we just take a reality check here? I mean, you've seen the videos, we've seen drone footage that the Ukrainians have provided, we've seen overhead satellites and stuff. It is actually extraordinary to see how they did target civilians in real time on video. The evidence is there.
Absolutely, the evidence is there. There's one incident that took place at the beginning of March where you saw there was a drone crew from the Ukrainians, which is a civil defense force, and you see a tank shooting a civilian. You see a civilian getting out of a car, raising their hands, and getting mowed down by a Russian tank. And 2 people were killed in that incident. There's others as well that we've seen that we've been able to geolocate and verify. Of course, this geolocation is so important in this conflict. But yes, it is something that's happened. And in other cases, I mean, those were the most blatant cases, but there's other cases where just recklessness, carelessness, and it led to civilians dying. And I think one of the things that we always have to keep in mind, we always have to take a step back in all of this and remind ourselves at the beginning of this, the Russians claimed they were only here to target Nazis or something. They would not harm the civilian population. Look at these places.
And actually, it's important also to say that the Ukrainian officials say, look, they're not just running away because they're trying to regroup or whatever. We have pushed them out. And actually, we have got some very exclusive video and access to some prisoners of war. We're hearing now from 2 former Ukrainian prisoners of war. Let's just listen to them.
At first, they took us very aggressively and made us shout "Glory to Russia." And whoever didn't want to do that, they used physical measures.
Very bad. They hit me in the face with machine gun butts and kicked me. My front teeth were also chipped.
I mean, it's pretty amazing to hear that, and it appears that the Ukrainians managed to get some 83 to 86 POWs back in return for sending some
Thanks
Russians
to the
back.
negotiations that have been going on. The negotiations that continue to go on. But there's other harrowing stories from these people. You can see some of the video here. Obviously, they're very relieved to finally be out of there, getting greeted by some of their comrades, some of their friends. You know, and they were taken prisoner in various places along the front lines, and then brought together and brought over here. But a lot of them did say that they had been harmed. I mean, you see people here on crutches, unclear where that came from. But there's others who say that their legs were beaten, that they were humiliated. One of the things they said was really bad. They had to watch Russian TV all day, which they said was bad. But in general, look at this. I mean, look at the
morale of the Russians.
I don't think they said much about that. But I think that the Russians, they did say that the Russians believed that they were all neo-Nazis, and I'm sure we're surprised to find that isn't the case. And it's the big lie of this war, that the Russian troops come here, they think they're liberating these people, and these people don't want to get liberated. They're fine, and that's just one of the big things where you just see the reality gap. That the Russian government has just lied to its own troops, to its own people, is lying to them, and then obviously that's probably one of the reasons why they walked into this disaster.
It's extraordinary, and we've still got weeks of this to play out. Fred, thank you so much indeed. Now, let's talk more about the state of this war right now, because I'm being joined by the CNN military analyst and the former Supreme Allied Commander of NATO, General Wesley Clark. Welcome to the program, General Clark. We go back a long way. We've covered a lot of wars together, and I just wonder what you're seeing now with this claim of liberation around Kyiv, obviously redirection of forces to the east, but how you see the momentum countrywide potentially, playing out over the next few weeks?
Well, it's on a knife edge, Christian. I mean, it's really reassuring to see the liberation of the Kyiv area. On the other hand, if the Russian forces that are building up in the Donbass are not eliminated, this moment of exultation could be very, very temporary. There's a lot of Russian combat power there. And remember, The Ukrainians don't have their own military industrial complex. They're dependent on assistance from other countries, not only the U.S., but from our NATO allies, because they need that kind of old Soviet equipment. They can't use our M1 tanks and so forth. If they don't get what they need, they could be quickly overwhelmed by the Russians in the next offensive.
So certainly the Ukrainians are not feeling exultant at all. As you say, they're also saying that the next phase of this, the East and the South, is going to be very, very difficult, is what the senior defense official said here. Now, you talk about this equipment that they need, that they can use. So the U.S. has announced a lot more aid, military aid, including heavy armor and Soviet-era tanks. Tell us what they might be and how they might play into this.
You know, well, of course, we don't have those Soviet-era tanks. Our Polish allies, Bulgarian, Czechs, Slovaks, people in Eastern Europe have those tanks. How many do they need? Several hundred, maybe more. If you look at what the Russians are prepared to throw against them, it could be as many as another 1,000 tanks, 2,000, 3,000 tubes of artillery coming in Donbass. You can't have 40 tanks against 700 tanks and expect to succeed on this. The Ukrainians do have some tanks, but they've got to fight. They've got to still protect Kyiv. They've got a problem in the south. They've still got Russians in the south. In the Donbass area, it may look little on a map, but when you're there, that's a big, wide, open area. And so we've got to appreciate this. Christian, we're having a slight problem, we the Americans. We've been advising people for years that don't really want to fight. I mean, the Afghans, the Iraqis we tried to train, before that, the Vietnamese. But these people want to fight. They know how to do it. We've got to listen to them and give them what they need to win.
And, you know, you raise a good point, General Clark, because frankly, nobody thought, including U.S. intelligence, that actually the Ukrainians would be able to hold out and would have the heart to fight. So you're right. I mean, these people have actually shown what they are willing and capable of doing. And I hear you saying has to be defeated. We talked to General Hodges last hour, who said this is the moment to break the back of the Russian military, you know, machine. And in terms of the Russians who say they're looking at a early May victory, what is it going to take then right now? Do you think it's possible to break that back, as you say, in several weeks, or is it going to take a long time?
It depends on the rate of resupply and the rate of the provision of this heavy equipment that we can get into Ukraine. They've got lots of troops. They've got a lot of people who aren't well equipped, who know how to use this equipment. They're very technologically savvy. They can take our equipment and rewire it and make it work better than it works for us. Some of our counter battery radars, for example. So we're not dealing with a third world country here, but we are dealing with a country that doesn't have its own defense establishment, and it's critically reliant on us. They believe they're fighting for us, and I believe it too. Ukraine is the toughest opponent Russia will have to fight. If it gets through Ukraine, NATO's, these countries in the front line don't have the experience. They don't have the size of the forces. They don't have the same population. This is for all the marbles here in Ukraine. This is the future of the international system. I think the United States has come to realize this. We've just got to break the logjam and getting them the full array of equipment they need and not prejudging it and thinking we know better than they do. We probably don't. Not on this battlefield.
Yeah, it's remarkable, and the stakes, as you say, are so massively high. General Clark, thank you for joining us. And still to come, after a break, a church in a small Ukrainian town has become a temporary home for refugees fleeing Russia's attacks. How they made the daring escape, that's ahead.
Thanks to Realtor.com.
And I'm going to keep using this product.
Voting 400.
Italian, you know, it's got Italian written.
We're going to come and give it
Chairman Brown and Ranking Member.
Wait a minute. People don't think I should have won?
It was manured and plowed last fall. Now, after liming and harrowing, it is ready to plant.
oil depot so that it could, create the premise that it was under attack from the Ukrainians. You think the Ukrainians are responsible?
Well, first of all, good for him. Great operational security. He is a great commander-in-chief. There's a possibility Ukraine did it. If Ukraine did it, good for them. I say it might, though, have been a helicopter insertion of a special ops team blowing that up on the ground. We may never know, but it may be the first of many such attacks by Ukraine. I hope they can carry that out.
Brett also asked him about the protection of other nations. Of course, the question as to whether or not Ukraine could ever join NATO is at the center of this war. But here is President Zelenskyy's response when asked about that by Brett. Listen.
Short of NATO, short of Article 5 protection, you're saying a group of nations provide security guarantees. Has President Biden offered the U.S. as one of those countries?
It's hard for us to talk about NATO because NATO doesn't want to admit us. I think it's a mistake because if we join NATO, we would make NATO much stronger. We are not a weak state.
He didn't specifically answer the question as to whether the United States has offered to guarantee the security, the future security of Ukraine. But he did make a case once again for Ukraine's admission to NATO. That would make Vladimir Putin absolutely nuts if it were to happen.
Well, President Zelenskyy was being very polite because the fact is Britain, Poland, and Ukraine already have a mutual defense treaty. The U.S. isn't part of that. Ukraine has earned NATO's military respect. Personally, I think they deserve to be a member, but it won't happen as long as there are Russian forces in the territory. That was always the sticking point. And as for making Putin mad, well, at this point, I think that's something we just can't worry about. Ukraine is going to have really strong security guarantees. I want to see him kick every Russian out of Ukraine, but they will still need very strong security guarantees in the future.
What is your analysis as to the reason the Russians are pulling back? Is it because they've had their tails kicked and they need to regroup, or are they planning to simply try to occupy the eastern part of the country, hold on to that as their war prize?
Both. Ukraine won round one by stopping Russia's forces from encircling Kyiv. So Russia has pulled back those forces from Kyiv. Also, that means they can shell and bomb Kyiv if they need to. They are focusing on the east. And what we're going to see now is Ukraine with the initiative planning where Ukraine will counterattack against Russian forces. And that's why Ukraine needs $300 million and all the military support and equipment and intelligence and tactical coaching that we can give them at this point as they carry that fight to the east.
The United States has been providing Javelin anti-tank and anti-weapon missiles. It's been providing the Stinger missiles that are particularly good against low-flying aircraft. Ukraine wants those Russian MiGs from the Poland Air Force, which we have been loath to deliver thus far. And one of the arguments was that the Javelins and the Stingers are defensive weapons. The aircraft could be offensive weapons. Well, if we are now delivering them old Russian tanks, those are offensive weapons as well. What's the difference between sending them tanks and sending them, MiG-22s, 29s?
I know there's really no difference between a T-72 tank that's going to come out of the Czech Republic and go over there and a MiG-29. Just to recap, Zelenskyy wants aircraft because his cities are being bombed. He would like to stop some of the 300 Russian sorties per day. Also, potentially, he can use aircraft to support his ground counterattack and to fend off potential Russian air power that may hit the Ukrainians as they come and fight closer to the east. That's why he wants it. I would give him those MiG-29s tomorrow if it was up to me.
We'll see what the administration eventually decides to do. So far, it's been a no-go. Dr. Rebecca Grant, we appreciate your time tonight. Thank you. Pope Francis arriving in Malta today to help shine a light on Europe's migration crisis. The Pope greeted reporters on board his flight this morning. And at one point, he was handed a picture and a letter he received from the family of Fox News cameraman Pierre Zajewski. Pierre was killed last month outside Kyiv, Ukraine, in an attack while covering the ongoing war. When handed the photo of Pierre today, the Pope commented in Italian saying, quote, "He is up there." Journalist and Fox News consultant Alexandra Sasha Kuvshinova also died in that attack. Our reporter Benjamin Hall was injured as well. Here at home, there's been no let-up in the crisis at our southern border. More than 2,000 migrants are getting past Border Patrol every single day. Critics say it will get worse now that certain restrictions will end next month. We'll explain in a live report from the border next.
Also limitations on the kinds of territory the committee could question him about. So you can't talk to me about specific things that I told the president at the time, but you can ask me about my impressions and my takeaway of events. And I think the Congresswoman kind of alluded to this about his version, but also his impression of what was going on. My understanding from our own reporting that's been going on for a year is that Jared Kushner was very convinced that the president had lost the election, very convinced that it was impossible to challenge it, and that the legal challenges were exhausted, and that evidence of fraud was slim to none. And so that impression is important as well, because you can imagine he shared that with then president and his father-in-law, Donald Trump.
Matt, I don't need to tell you, I don't need to tell Carol, I do not need to tell our audience that time is of the essence here. My colleague Joy Reid asked Vice President Harris if she is satisfied with the pace of the Justice Department's investigation into January 6th. Here's how she responded. Take a listen.
Well, I will tell you, maybe as a point of distinction between our administration and the previous administration, we do not interfere or attempt to influence the investigative and prosecutorial decisions of the Department of Justice.
Matt, your thoughts?
Well, I think, I mean, there's this two pressure points that have come at this, which is the one of leave the Justice Department alone after we saw what happened with the Trump Justice Department and the incredible pressure and politics that was played there. There's that pressure of just like, let's be clean, let's do this by the book. And then there's the pressure of we're 14 months since January 6th, and there's been no prosecution of any big dogs in this. It's been all of the sort of players on the ground in this, but nobody at any high level, nobody in the administration, nobody that's associated with Congress, nobody that's sort of lead GOP official that was involved in this. And so I think there's tremendous grassroots pressure, and I think there's a general frustration at this. And my guess is it exists in the White House too, is that we keep going on and on and on and on. And it seems like the rich and powerful in this country get away with anything. And I think that's the sense of a lot of people in America out there is it's like, is this another case of the rich and powerful? They can do something in front of our eyes and for all of us to see and for all of us to watch, and they're able to get away with it because they are rich and powerful, and that's how the system works. So I think you have these two countervailing pressures. Let's do it by the book. Let's not pressure anybody, and let's not, push this. But also, I think there's a growing frustration that at some point indictments have to arise to a higher level than just what they've had so far.
Carol, I think Matt articulated that frustration, captured that frustration so well. And I think I would add to that, the part of the frustration is that there are sitting members of Congress who were involved in this. The Washington Post reporting that Senator Cruz also played a major part in Attorney John Eastman's scheme to overturn the election. What was Cruz doing, Carol, behind the scenes to support Trump's coup?
Well, he was, as so many of former President Trump's allies, loyally delivered over and over again, despite the laws, despite the statutes, despite the facts. He was enabling former President Trump and encouraging him that he could pursue this legal strategy of blocking the certification of the votes, and said he would help him take this case as a legal one, to help be the lawyer essentially for it. And that encouragement is no small thing, because remember, over and over again in the Trump presidency, what are the problems that got Donald Trump left of the side of good and right? And those things often were people whispering in his ears that this would work or this would be okay. Rudy Giuliani stands out as well as another person. But let's be clear, Ted Cruz is not the only lawmaker who was encouraging President Trump at this time. You know, you have a huge number of members of the Freedom Caucus doing the same thing, meeting with Trump in late December to sort of plan how they were going to keep the election of Biden from proceeding. So there's really something there. I need to add one thing after covering the Justice Department and federal courts for a long time. There are potentially really good reasons why the Department of Justice hasn't brought any indictments of any high-level people, and that is even, you know, in a mob case, in a drug case, even the most basic case in, you know, Northwest D.C., a drug team, a drug cartel, it can take 2 years to roll all the little people up until you get to the big people. There can be bad reasons as well why the Justice Department hasn't moved in the direction that many activists and Democrats are crying for. And one of those bad reasons is a sensitivity about this topic, a fear of enraging and looking political, whether you are or not, appearing to be political. And that's a big fear I know of in the Department of Justice.
Carol, thank you for that critical context. As always, Matt, you are staying with me because next, just how close to the Trump White House was Ginny Thomas? New reporting that the wife of the Supreme Court Justice recommended Team Trump hired known bigots, conspiracy theorists, even a suspected foreign spy. The journalist who uncovered all of those details joins me next. And later, we put the focus on refugees. More than 4 million have now fled Ukraine, their future uncertain. We spoke to some of them today.
Our city has been under Russian occupation since February 24. It seems calm now, but no one knows what will happen next. But we have something worth coming back for. Children, sisters, everything we have in life is all there.
Home for news. Positively KELOLAND on KELOLAND News and on KELOLAND.com.
Another major part of the match.
And on a finger stick.
Tried, and I wanted to try Plexiderm.
Your first alert forecast to show you if your weekend plans are a go or not.
So go ahead, hit that.
Bronze was made between the 7th century BC and the...
Ask your eye doctor.
Doppler HD Storm Center. I am meteorologist Scott Muntz. As we go through the day today, we'll have mostly sunny skies, temperatures in the 50s for afternoon highs. Parts of western South Dakota may hit 60 degrees. Then we'll watch for that next chance for precipitation. This will come in for tomorrow. Even a possibility of snow to greet you across north central South Dakota. That will try to expand and move to the east and southeast as we do go through the day for tomorrow. Notice that snow chance that we have in the afternoon and evening, Watertown to Brookings and to the east. And this could be an area that picks up some slushy accumulations around the trace, maybe an inch or two. We think the best chance to see over 2 inches will be in west central Minnesota, in and around Marshall. And the hills of western South Dakota cannot be ignored either. They may see of around 2 inches or more, as well as extreme northwestern South Dakota. Again, with temperatures, probably in the 30s, we'll have a slushy accumulation across eastern and northeastern South Dakota. A lot of this will be gone as we do get into early next week. We are continuing our chances for precipitation next week. In fact, through Friday, there could be a couple of areas here around a 1/3 to a 1/2 inch or more. And I think that will extend from here on to Brookings into western Minnesota, even northwestern Iowa, around a 1/4 to a 1/2 inch of rainfall. And then where we have the blue color there in the central and south central South Dakota, I don't think the amounts will be as great, but we might be able to, sneak in there around a 1/4 inch of precipitation, Rapid City down toward winter. Temperatures this week, close to average until we hit Thursday. Thursday, we'll have a quick hit of some colder air come in. Temperatures well below average. But look what happens as we get into the second half of next weekend. We'll see that warmer weather eventually return, and that may continue into next week. Now, in the meantime, for today, mostly sunny skies. A lot of us will have temperatures in the 50s. 60-degree weather possible today in western South Dakota.
It's an Elvis and George Strait tribute on one night. Don't miss a tribute to the Kings. Coming to Grand Falls Casino and Golf Resort April 30th. Tickets are on sale now online at grandfallscasinoresort.com.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Warnock. Senator Toomey is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Ippolito and Professor Hyman, let me address this question to the two of you, and I think you touched on this, but I just...
Claritin D, so you can breathe better.
Reports we have seem real of Russians listening to their relatives in Ukraine and not believing it. But as Angela said, maybe they don't want to believe it because they don't like the consequences. So this is a very flimsy house of cards that Putin has built with his information system, which could easily come crashing down, especially as the extensive Russian casualties become known.
So just to pursue that with you quickly, Ambassador, what about this whole notion that he's isolated, that he is being, not told the truth, he completely miscalculated everything, maybe he doesn't even know what's happening on the battlefield. Do you actually think that's possible, that he might not know how bad things are going?
I think it is plausible for the following reason. I talked to many people who've had access to the Kremlin. And I would say over the past 6 or 7 years, they all tell roughly the following story. That, 15, 20 years ago, there were people around Putin who were more or less his equals, his peers, and he listened to them. But as early as, say, 2013, 2014, after he came back to the presidency in 2012, he set things up and he removed a lot of those peers. And even folks who are close to him think carefully about what they tell him because he wants to hear something. And they don't want to disappoint him. So the notion he's not well informed, I think, is a plausible one.
Angela Stend, I've spoken to foreign leaders who tell me that they tell Putin what's going on, but he comes back at them with all sorts of, I guess, conspiracy theories and his own agenda and ideology. He talks about terrorists and, extremists inhabiting Mariupol, for instance. A lot of people have posited that his real aim, his real ideology right now is about reconstructing empire, not the Soviet Union, but the idea of empire or at least dependencies. What do you think? What do you think is his motivating purpose right now?
Well, he said in 2005 famously that the greatest geopolitical catastrophe of the 20th century was the collapse of the Soviet Union. He has been determined to reverse that in some form, not reconstruct the Soviet Union, but certainly rebuild part of the Russian Empire. Ukraine was supposed to be the first step on the way, first of all, to create a new Slavic union between Russia, Belarus, and Ukraine, and then possibly move further westward and recreate a sphere of influence in Central and Eastern Europe. He really wants to reverse the results of the Soviet collapse, to revisit the settlement that was agreed upon in 1991. That's his ultimate aim. Of course, it's going much more difficult for him in Ukraine than he thought, but he has broader ambitions than just, quote unquote, swallowing Ukraine.
And to both of you, let me ask you first, Ambassador, we've got a short time left. Do you think that there's any mileage in what the Ukrainians keep saying, and that they want a direct face-to-face between the two presidents? Putin has said no. Do you think does he consider Zelenskyy his equal? He's very dismissive.
No, he considers Zelenskyy to be clearly subordinate to him. I understand why Zelenskyy wants it, but I don't think there's going to be anything that comes of it. Putin will have to understand at some point that his military ambitions in Ukraine are a failure, at which point real negotiations, not the show we've seen thus far, might begin.
And last word to you, Angela Stend, what do you think? Can you see any room for a negotiation?
Well, not at the moment. The Russians aren't serious about it, and the Kremlin keeps saying that nothing has progressed there. Maybe down the road there will be, but that will only be when the Russians realize that their military defeat is imminent, or at least they're not doing nearly as well as they wanted to. They're not ready for real negotiations now.
Interesting, the U.S. intelligence says that they think Russia is aiming for an early May victory somewhere in the east, which I've just been told corresponds to, Victory Day back in World War II. Angela Stend, Ambassador John Herbst, thank you very much indeed for joining me. Now, still ahead, dysfunctional and demoralized. New intelligence indicates that some Russian soldiers are refusing to carry out orders, some even lying to Vladimir Putin. Now, the West could be using that against him. We'll discuss next.
Before I got Laura, 20.
President is back with us now from Lviv, Ukraine, to give us an assessment of the situation in that country. Jeff.
Well, yeah, John, the week started with peace talks in Turkey between Ukrainian and Russian members of different negotiating delegates. And coming out of those peace talks, the Russian delegate essentially promised to pull troops back from Kyiv and Chernihiv. Well, days after that happened, it almost seemed as if fighting had intensified in that area. But now officials are saying that it appears there is a troop withdrawal, especially in the Kyiv region. However, many officials, especially involved with the Ukrainian army and their forces, are sort of, looking at this with question. They don't know exactly what's going to happen. And, even the president of Ukraine giving caution and telling people to not necessarily come back to that city because it could be very dangerous right now, especially considering what maybe Russian troops left behind, whether they're mines or other traps that could hurt civilians. So it's being met with sort of cautious optimism, this announcement today that Kyiv has been liberated, because of course to the east and to the south, fighting continues, especially in Mariupol. That's where you have somewhere in the range of 100,000 people who are still trapped and cut off from the outside world. They really don't have many resources to live, and all of this humanitarian aid is struggling to get in, and the people who want to get out aren't being let out. So those are two main headlines we're following here today in Ukraine, John.
It is thought that Vladimir Putin thought he would encircle Kyiv and essentially win the fall of that city and install a puppet government within just a few days of his invasion. It's been more than a month, and he never did succeed in encircling Kyiv, right, Jeff?
No, and as of now, like I was saying, the officials on the ground there say that Kyiv has been liberated and people are now trying to get back into the city. But the president here in Ukraine, again, warning that it's just too dangerous. And, many of these people who are escaping places like Mariupol and some cities like Irpin are coming to western Ukraine, where we are. We had a strike last week about a mile to mile and a half outside of the city center here, and that definitely caught a lot of people off guard, but reminded them that this country is at war. But we continue to see lots of people coming to this city, especially this region, to find safety and in some cases sort of regroup and figure out what they're going to do next.
It's hard to believe we're looking at images from Mariupol as you're talking. It's hard to believe that there are still, 100,000 people in that city. They've tried to get out time and time again, and the Russians have always shelled the evacuation convoys.
Yeah, and the Red Cross has been trying to get in there, and they've tried to sort of make agreements with both sides to say, look, this is what we want to do. We have buses. We're neutral. We're pro-humanity. We want to just get people who want to get out to safety, and the people who are staying, we want to get them the aid that they need. But in their sort of cryptic way of responding without placing any blame, Red Cross is just saying we're unable to do that at this point. So there are many people who are stuck in that city who are suffering, and they literally can't get out even if they wanted to. We're talking they don't have food, they don't have water, they're chopping down trees and burning them just to stay warm. Absolutely heartbreaking.
Jeff Paul reporting live from Lviv in Ukraine. Jeff, thank you. We will have more on all of this with Florida Republican Congressman Brian Mast at the top of our next hour.
Plus, I'm going to talk to two Ukrainian artists stuck here in the U.S. because of the war. How their Miami gallery has become a point of pride for the community. We have new video today of Italian police seizing the yacht of the Russian oligarch. That yacht, worth more than $500,000. This happened last month. It is part of a worldwide campaign to seize assets of some of Putin's closest supporters.
To help prevent bleeding gums, try
the demands of today month, but fatter paychecks across America. Wages up more than 5% from last year.
Even though we created a record number of jobs, I know, that this job is not finished. We need to do more to get prices under control.
As paychecks are becoming easier to find, but harder to stretch. Susan Lee says especially for people she knows on fixed incomes.
What did you think when you saw what it cost at the final tally?
I just don't know how they do it. They make ends meet.
As for gas prices, the Biden administration has announced tighter fuel standards for cars and trucks, saying it will save drivers hundreds of dollars a year, but not for a couple more years. Adriana?
Scott McFarland, thank you. Sarah Palin is returning to politics. The Republican and former Alaska governor has joined a field of 50 other candidates. That is crowded. They're all vying for the state's lone U.S. House seat. It had been held by Representative Don Young, who died last month. A new COVID wave could be coming, testing our ability to live with the virus. CBS's Michael George joins us with the details. Michael?
Adriana, good evening. COVID is down but not out, and health experts are concerned the U.S. isn't doing enough to prepare for a potential spike of the BA2 subvariant. Today, New York City's mask mandate for 2- to 4-year-olds remains in place after an appeals court stay late Friday. The ruling has the support of Mayor Eric Adams.
COVID is a formidable opponent, and we're going to continue to pivot and shift as we move along.
Nationwide, new COVID cases are still low, but rising in the Northeast as BA2 becomes the dominant strain in the U.S. This is the number of Americans getting vaccinated is at the lowest levels of the pandemic. That has some this week sounding the alarm about the lack of federal funding for testing and vaccinations.
We have to get the money. It's not going to last this past probably June 1st.
BA2 is causing enormous problems overseas. The UK hit a record of nearly 5 million new cases last week. And in China, one of the world's largest cities, Shanghai, has locked down its 26 million residents to conduct mass testing. And back in New York, the performance of Macbeth on Broadway was canceled after star Daniel Craig tested positive for COVID. Adriana?
Michael George, thank you. There is new fallout from Will Smith's slap at Sunday's Oscars. He's resigned from the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. CBS's Marcy Gonzalez in Hollywood has more reporting on the disciplinary action that could come next. Marcy?
Adriana, good evening. While the Academy did accept his resignation, this is far from over, with several punishments still being considered. First the slap, then the fallout. Now Will Smith is getting a jump on the Academy by resigning.
Will Smith's team, by saying we're resigning, they took away what was the easiest piece of punishment that the Academy had in its arsenal.
The resignation means Smith can no longer vote for Academy Award nominations. A first repercussion with more to come, according to The Hollywood Reporter's chief TV critic, Daniel Feinberg. What are the options on the table for the Academy?
The easiest option is simply to say, yes, you're not a member anymore, but in addition, you won't be allowed on the stage or to attend the Oscars.
When the Academy's Board of Directors votes on disciplinary action on April 18th, it could also make the 53-year-old ineligible for future nominations, or it could take the actor's Oscar back.
The minute you do that, you open up questions about all of the other Oscars that have been won by people over the years who have committed crimes. They don't want that. It's not going to happen.
And Smith says he will accept any further consequences the board deems appropriate. So far, Chris Rock has only said he's still processing what happened and will comment eventually. Adriana?
Marcy Gonzalez, thank you. The NCAA Women's Championship is set.
The South Carolina Gamecocks are one win away from title number 2.
South Carolina ousted Louisville last night, and UConn defeated last year's champion Stanford to clinch spots in the title game tomorrow. The men's Final Four begins tonight. The Villanova Wildcats take on the top-seeded Kansas City Jayhawks, and arch rivals Duke and North Carolina tip off in what could be Duke coach Mike Krzyzewski's final game. Straight ahead on the CBS Weekend News, maternity crisis, why some hospitals in rural America have stopped delivering babies. And later, popular podcast, meet the Minnesota priest, topping the charts.
beginning, God created the heavens and the earth.
Stiffness, swelling, and for some,
Stars in the upcoming movie Emancipation, it is already getting Oscar buzz. Whit.
Zareen, thank you. We turn to politics now, and former vice presidential candidate and Alaska governor Sarah Palin hoping to make a comeback, filing papers to run for Congress. Palin out of office for nearly 13 years, but not out of the public eye. But as ABC's White House correspondent Karen Travers tells us, Palin has an uphill battle.
She shook up the race for the White House in 2008.
Drill, baby, drill. They say the difference between a hockey mom and a pit bull, lipstick.
And tonight, after nearly 13 years, Sarah Palin jumping back into politics, filing paperwork at an elections office just 1 hour before the deadline to run for Alaska's only seat in the House. And announcing her campaign on Facebook, writing, "Public service is a calling. America is at a tipping point. I knew I had to step up and join the fight." Palin has strong name recognition, but she's joining a crowded field, more than 50 candidates running in this special election.
Sarah Palin has been outside of politics for more than a decade, and she is quite a polarizing figure inside Alaska and beyond. It is far from clear whether Sarah Palin is going to be successful in this venture.
Governor Sarah Palin.
In 2008, John McCain shocked America when he picked Palin to be his running mate.
Senator, I am honored to be chosen as your running mate.
Launching her from Alaska governor to political star, immortalized on Saturday Night Live.
And I can see Russia from my house.
Even making an appearance herself.
Live from New York, it's Saturday night.
Despite losing that race and then stepping down as governor, Palin was a hero to what became the Tea Party movement.
Our next president of the United States, Donald J. Trump.
Out of office, Palin staying in the spotlight, writing books, appearing on cable television, even starring in a reality TV show. This is the first time Alaska will try a new way to vote, with members of every party running against each other in a special election primary. The top 4 candidates will move on. They'll repeat that process in the fall to see who will win a full term. Whit.
A race to watch, Karen, thank you. Tonight, a warning that Iran may be planning to try to interfere in our midterm elections. The Department of Homeland Security says Iranian operators are researching the current American political landscape as a prelude to attempting to stoke division. Officials say Iran may be trying to build on tactics employed 2 years ago using bogus social media accounts they tried to link to far-right groups. Now to the murder of that off-duty sheriff's deputy in Houston, killed during an attempted theft of a catalytic converter from his vehicle. The precious metals inside becoming a major target for thieves. Here's ABC's transportation correspondent, Gio Benitez.
Tonight, the attempted theft of a pricey car part in a Houston neighborhood leading to the death of an off-duty sheriff's deputy. Darren Almendares and his wife were just leaving this grocery store when they noticed 3 men by their car. Police say Almendares went to confront them, but they opened fire.
I got one shot in the chest.
Almendares firing back, hitting 2 of the men, but losing his own life.
He told his wife to run, to get away from danger, as he put himself in harm's way to protect the rest of the community and to try to stop a crime.
Right now, I see the vehicle passing.
Almendares, a 23-year veteran of the department, was part of the Harris County Sheriff's auto theft unit. Police believe the 3 men were trying to steal his car's catalytic converter. That's a critical part of the muffler system, and it's happening all across the country. Authorities say thieves can make up to $300 per converter, the precious metals in them soaring in value, now worth more than gold.
If a hero is not saved in their own community, then the general public is not, and we're not going to tolerate that.
And with tonight, the officer's colleagues say that he was a fighter and that he died protecting his wife. Whit.
All right, Gio Benitez for us. Thank you. We have much more ahead on World News Tonight this Saturday. The major change coming for new cars sold in the U.S. And tonight, new findings on how the Omicron variant affects young children.
Out of control.
And Steve Patterson joins us from Los Angeles. Steve, what's the time frame for when the Academy could take the next steps?
Jose, the Academy's Board of Governors scheduled to meet next on April 18th. It should by then have a decision on what additional actions, if any, it will take against Smith. Jose?
Steve Patterson in Los Angeles, thank you. Up next, the new lengths crooks are going to steal billions from the U.S. government.
Wayfair has everything I need to make my
Approved over-the-counter asthma inhaler and breathe easy.
The fourth dose, or the second booster, just got authorized by the FDA, but they bypassed their own technical expert advisory committee. These are top scientists from around the country, including the editor-in-chief of the New England Journal of Medicine, who is basically...
Those remaining still showed incredible defiance and fortitude.
I've traveled every road in this city.
50, that's very peculiar. And while the FDA's supersonic speed fast-tracked the fourth dose, they've been sitting for months on Covaxin, which is a traditional vaccine technology. It's a COVID vaccine that gives broader immunity to different variants, and it's something that should be authorized right now. It's already been authorized by the WHO and countries around the world. We need it here now.
I know that at Johns Hopkins, where you are on the faculty, they have developed a new COVID test, but you're sort of two minds about it. Why?
I have mixed feelings about it. First of all, it is important to have a saliva-based test, and that's what my colleagues at Johns Hopkins have developed, a saliva-based test that is expected to get FDA approval as early as 6 months from now. That could be helpful, but the idea that we need to continue to do mass testing of asymptomatic and extremely low-risk people is something that just doesn't make sense. It's not a good use of healthcare resources, for one thing, because we still have Americans who don't have access to basic healthcare. We're far better to spend that money on, say, prenatal vitamins and basic health care than spend money on expensive testing around a virus which is inevitable, and most of the population already has immunity to this virus, which means they've got a significant downgrading of that severity of illness to reduce it to a mild common cold-like illness.
Yeah, and you suggest that in the future, the COVID is going to be less virulent than the flu. Is that right?
That's right. A study just came out. It was published in the Financial Times that it's officially now less dangerous than the flu on a case-by-case basis. The infection fatality rate is lower, so we've got to learn to live with it. That means we don't mass asymptomatic test everybody, and we retreat from these COVID zero strategies that we still have in many parts of the country and replace them with common sense. If you have the illness, stay home. If you're around someone vulnerable to high risk, be careful or wear a high-quality mask.
Common sense has been in short supply during this pandemic. Dr. Marty Makary, you always bring it to us. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Well, actor Will Smith resigning from the Motion Picture Academy after slapping comedian Chris Rock on stage at the Oscars last weekend. What does it mean for his future in Hollywood? We'll dive into that next.
At Empower, we believe in opening doors.
And this is what you're witnessing in Ukraine. And at the end of the day, I hope that the West will wake up and get their rose-colored glasses off and actually start doing something.
You think they still have rose-colored glasses on?
I do.
About?
I do. About the fact that we can solve this in a diplomatic way and that Putin will back off and that reason can be found behind all of this. Well, no. Putin's aggression is of such a level that it can only be hit back by force, and the force bigger than its own. Ukraine is doing fine with all the weapons coming in from the West, but eventually if we are to get rid of it once and for all and to make our world a safer place for everyone and send a strong message to dictators out there as well, then we must unite efforts, and the international community must be here on the ground pushing back with us on this aggression.
Lesia, when we spoke in the first week of the war before I got here, you said, I've got my machine gun, and you've tweeted that I've also got my manicures. Yes. Your resistance takes many, many forms. And you're actually carrying your pistol right now.
I am. I do have my PM with me, and I carry it actually with me all the time. It's become my best friend.
And as we speak, we can hear the multiple, you know, anti-aircraft or anti-missile batteries going out.
Yeah, but to be honest, it's yes, it's small, it's compact, it's comfortable. You can carry it in the sort of backpack or a bag. Also, when I had a big puffy coat, I used to carry it with me like
and
this.
Did you ever imagine in your life that as an MP in 2022 in Ukraine, you'd be forced to carry a gun around?
No, never, never. I'm actually very much anti-gun, and this gun caused a lot of problems for me because in order to recharge it, you have to sort of like do this thing, and with the nails, I had very nice, beautiful, long nails. It was impossible to do so. They had to all come off, and yes, so in order to recharge it, you have to sort of like do this. It's okay, like when you put it back in, but this thing took me a long time to learn how to do, especially with the nails. So they came off.
And this is government issue, right? I mean, you've all been issued with self-defense, self-protection.
Yeah.
And so the nails, I mean, seriously.
Yeah, that's it. They are gone. They are gone. I had like, it took me 30 years of my life to grow nails, long nails. I had a very bad habit of biting them, a lot of anxiety, and then suddenly I was able to do that. I had them for about half a year, and then this started. So maybe one of the things that I hate Putin for most is that I lost my nails because of that. But at least I learned how to use a gun. So there's pros and cons everywhere.
And just so people are clear, the idea of beauty, self-maintenance is also resistance.
Yes, all jokes aside, it's an important element for all women who are fighting alongside the manfolk here. The women still want to be beautiful. They still want to have dignity as women.
And to be human.
And to be human. And it's a sign of humanity that, you know, life is coming back and life is worth living. So actually, along with the many cafes which are starting to reopen in Kiev, the salons are starting to reopen as well. You can get your hair done, you can get your nails done. I have a wonderful manicurist, Julia, who herself carries a gun, and she says, my salon is the most secure of them all. I can provide safety for my clients and do the nails.
And what message are you sending to the other side when you act like human beings and you're not dehumanized? He basically said, Putin, that Ukraine doesn't exist as a nation. You don't exist as a people.
And we say to him, life goes on, we carry on living. Your war, you're fighting against us is in the background now, and we'll go on fighting it for as long as we have to, but we will go on living at the same time.
Would you shoot somebody with that gun?
I would. I would for sure, because it's your way to life. You know, when you hear stories of Russian soldiers kicking doors open, raping the women, killing the men, then you realize that that's the choice you have to make. You sleep with the gun, you stay alive. You take it for granted, and that's it. You can be a victim.
And they won't be victims. That's it for now. Thank you for joining me. I'm Christiana Amanpour in Kyiv, and Erica Hill takes over CNN Newsroom Live after a quick break. Have a good night.
For my COPD?
That is Verizon. Antiques Roadshow is available with PBS Passport and on
Take reason. As the Academy's rules stand, Smith will no longer be a voting member of the organization now that he has resigned. Though he can still attend future Academy ceremonies, he can still get nominated for consideration and keep his Best Actor Oscar. Here is LA Times analyst Michael Ordonia.
I think it's an embarrassment for him to not be in the Academy, but I don't think it's going to have deep, significant, wide-ranging consequences for his career. I think that pretty much every studio in town still wants to be in the Will Smith business. The guy's his movies have made something like $6.5 billion worldwide, and this is a business.
The Academy has accepted Smith's resignation and is moving forward with its disciplinary proceedings against the actor for violating its standards of conduct. John?
Christina Coleman reporting from LA. Christina, thank you. I'm John Scott. Our live special coverage continues with an expanded edition of the Fox Report at the top of the hour. Straight ahead.
I earned 3%.
Now starting at $8.99. Now that's eating good in the neighborhood.
Fled the Capitol with their 2 kids. On the way, 6-year-old Sonia drew what she left behind.
Is that your cat?
Yes.
Sonia's art inspired her parents to collect drawings from other Ukrainian kids and post them online for everyone to see.
Also, we know that children want to have appreciation.
To feel them like not alone, but a part of a bigger community.
From age 5 and up, each child tells a story.
Say like Maria, 11 years old. She's very talented.
Arina, 11 years old. She drew a woman soldier.
Yeah, sniper woman, yeah. It's her mother.
Her mother is a sniper.
Girl. Yeah.
Some pictures show real war. Bombs, missiles.
Killed soldiers.
Others dream of peace, past, and future.
Yeah, it's created like a parallel world, you know, in which you could feel safe.
Artem and Nastya, who are still searching for safety in town after town across Ukraine, say encouraging kids to draw can also help parents like them.
Sending them to sit somewhere and turn on their fantasy and put it on the paper give to the parents also an opportunity to recharge the battery.
And they hope these creations will show the world the strength and suffering of their nation.
We hope that people looking on these pictures can feel compassion to support kids, to support Ukraine.
Because when the war ends, they say, it's Ukraine's children who will rebuild their country. Roxana Saberi, CBS News, London.
The incredible power of art. That is the news for this Saturday. And this note, this weekend marks the start of Ramadan. To our Muslim friends, family, and colleagues, Ramadan Mubarak. I'm Adriana Diaz in Chicago. Good night.
What a wonderful start to the weekend that we've been able to enjoy. That being said, though, things do start to unravel a little bit as we head into Sunday. Tonight, though, increasing cloudiness. Low temperatures on the outer side of 30. Then we get ready for a day with temperatures in the 50s the further south you go, but to the north and northeast, might be a different story. We'll talk about that in the rest of your 7-day forecast on the way. But until then, KELO Weekend News starts right now.
Live from KELOLAND Media Group, KELOLAND Weekend News.
Jackrabbit fans are celebrating. We begin tonight in Brookings with their reasons why. Good evening and thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Dan Santella. Earlier today, the SDSU Jackrabbits played for a title and Frost Arena was buzzing. KELOLAND's Tanner Castora joins us now to show us the championship scenes. Good evening, Tanner.
Good evening, Dan. As you just alluded to, by the looks of their overall resume, many felt the Jackrabbits deserved an at-large bid into the NCAA tournament. That didn't happen. They would instead accept an invite to play in the women's NIT. So after 5 consecutive wins Saturday afternoon, the hottest ticket in town was the women's NIT championship game between South Dakota State and Seton Hall. One final game in Brookings for senior Tylee Irwin. Early first quarter, Burkhart gives it down low for Tori Nelson. She puts that one away easily. Jacks with the first lead of the game. Later in the first, it's Haley Greer driving. She kicks it back out for the freshman Haley Timmer. She goes bottom. She had 14. SDSU was up 12-5. Still in the first quarter, it's Irwin giving it back to Nelson. Little hesitation, and she gets it to fall. The Jacks suddenly in front, 22-5. Pirates were in trouble, and they needed a timeout. But SDSU would not let up at all in the first half. It's Irwin swinging it over to Burkhart. That triple would go from the left wing. That would push the lead all the way up to 20. Jacks were rolling. Second quarter now, it's Timmer. No good here on the little 5-footer. The rebound from Callie Thielsen is there for the easy putback. She had a game-high 16. State led by 22 at the break. It was more of the same in the second half. South Dakota State runs away with this one, defeating Seton Hall 82-50, claiming the WNIT championship in front of a sold-out crowd.
Thank you, Tanner. We'll hear more from him momentarily in sports. After having to cancel the event the last 2 years because of COVID-19, USD hosted its 48th Wachipi celebration today. KELOLAND's Renee Ortiz attended the event this afternoon, and she joins us now to tell us about it. Good evening, Renee.
Good evening, Dan. The day featured singing, dancing, and celebration. The THPIA Student Council at USD has been planning this since November. The 2-day event features vendors, dance competitions, singers, drums groups. Men's fancy dancer Cmgus Vcr told me he felt complete being back at the event.
Being here at the powwow after 2 years, it's a great experience being around friends and family and loved ones and seeing people you haven't seen in a long time. It really makes me feel whole again.
The event continues on tomorrow.
Well, Renee, who else will our viewers meet tonight at 10 o'clock?
You're going to meet the event organizer. She told me she was also really excited about being back.
Great. Looking forward to that. Thank
Absolutely.
you, Renee. Turning to weather, it felt like what we might expect for the first weekend in April today.